Let's get straight into it, because this is one of the hottest topics, if not the hottest topic. I actually came back into technology journalism a few months ago, after a couple of years writing about vaccines and war and things like that. And what a time to come back into tech journalism. It's just AI, AI, AI. And we have a fantastic panel here today. In order from next to me, Meyer Pindeus, co-founder and CEO of Humanising Autonomy. Kriti Sharma, Chief Product Officer for Legal Tech at Thomson Reuters and founder of AI for Good, which hopefully does what it says on the tin. And Carl Mörch, co-director of FARI, the AI Institute for the Common Good. Ditto. Right, so bearing in mind we have very little time, briefly describe within 1 or 2 minutes what projects you're working on.
Should I kick it off?
Starting with you.
Yeah, Humanizing Autonomy. We focus on behavioral artificial intelligence, meaning being able to interpret and predict the behavior of people in an ethical and responsible way to help machines better understand people. It's really all about human-machine interactions, making them safer, more pleasant, and increasing the user experience.
Okay.
Great. A lot of our work focuses on building AI systems that can be used in a trusted and safe way for applications that where people may not have access to those services in the first place. So, for instance, legal and justice systems, where we see a real lack of availability of services at scale. So, courtrooms being able to do decisions faster, lawyers being able to get time back, and there's a lot of work and overlap of that in spaces around mental health and associated impact in our communities around the world, from consumers to professionals and so on. And one of the key areas which is of deep interest and effort for us is how do we build trust in AI systems? Because building the technology is, in many ways, the easy part, and it's about creating it in a way that humans can trust it and adopt it in areas like legal and justice systems. That's the harder work.
We are a research institute based in Brussels, and what we do is we try to do applied projects with local actors. Sounds easy, but it's not. And this is when you do try to embed powerful technologies in local context, different fields, that you really see the legal and the ethical challenges happening. So we do a lot of applied projects, but we also try to do a lot of education. And we have a test and experience center in the heart of the city where we try to make all these technologies a bit more tangible, visible, understandable. And so it's a continuous effort, and it's been 2 years.
One reason that I'm so glad to have this panel here is everybody's actually building stuff that shows how AI can be used for good things in a really tangible way. But let's just stay on the abstract for a moment. What do you understand by the term ethical AI or responsible AI or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, I'm happy to just have a go at this. I think, those terms are being used quite interchangeably, right? But they are fundamentally different. When I look at responsible, I would look at almost like a tactical, practical framework of how you build AI, how you make sure that AI is ethical, that there's you remove bias, that you preserve privacy, and so on. Ethical AI is kind of all of that as well, but it's more of a almost philosophical approach as well about what are the applications of AI? How do you actually treat AI or build AI ethically? What does it mean for people, for society, and so on? So they are intertwined, but I think the responsible AI piece is really where you start thinking, okay, what is our goal here? Yes, benefit for society, positive safety, etc. So how do we build this in from the training data to the way the AI is built, small data set, modularity, interpretability, etc.
Mm-hmm. I would just add, a big part of it is not building an ethical AI. In that we are now, at this moment in time, facing some real questions around areas where we should apply AI, where it benefits society and humanity, like a lot of work this group does. And then there are applications of AI where we shouldn't be building it, or we should be building it in a different way so humans have more control. And I think that debate has never been more profound and important than it is today. For the most part, the good news is people who are working in this field, their challenge is less about controlling machines that are about to kill us all or take over. Their challenge is more about getting humans to use them to do work.
But at a very basic level, I think the fact that there have been over 200 ethical guidelines in the past years, shows that there is an overall concern about the potential impact of these technologies. So when I hear, of course, ethical AI, the field of ethics, for me, is quite key because it's going beyond compliance. It's trying to investigate, looking into the moral consequences, the moral challenges, dilemmas that you have when you start developing AI, when you use AI, when you apply AI. You have a whole different set of field within ethics. From deontology, I come from healthcare, and ethical AI, for me, also means starting with the existing rules, the basics, standards that we have in place. And I think in the work that we do, trying to do a form of local AI, so to speak, it's also about thinking what values should we have in place locally to have our own version of what we find acceptable in terms of AI.
It's interesting you talk about local values. I mean, people talk about ethics in the AI context as if there's a monolithic something that everyone can agree on. But we live in very polarized times where I think people genuinely have different ethics. How much of that, how problematic is that going to be for the development of ethical AI? Or do you think there's enough consensus on what ethical should mean?
If I may, so I was involved and fortunate to be involved in, we did a big series of deliberations online during COVID, the best times, to interrogate citizens about the UNESCO recommendation on AI. And one of the first feedbacks we got from all across the world was that the rules in place were not context-specific, culturally adapted as well. And then once you start investigating a bit, do all these big moral standards, rules apply perfectly everywhere, universally, you know that it's not true. And this is where you need absolutely civic involvement and citizen consultation to adapt, fine-tune, and better grasp what does it mean, justice, fairness, transparency. Does it mean the same thing in Belgium or in China or in Japan? Maybe not. And so this is still an ongoing investigation.
Is it an issue that you've come up against, Kriti?
I would say that it's a bit sad that a lot of these decisions are left to individuals like us who are working on these projects to decide what's ethical, what is our organizational code of ethics or the ethics of creating code. And yeah, I've shared my sentiment about it with you, that I'm deeply, deeply, deeply disappointed at the pace of regulation or lack thereof. There's clear need from the industry. We need standards that we can operate within. Yeah, I do a lot of work with lawyers and accountants and so on. And we have very strict code of conduct for those industries. Yet when it comes to creating code and creating AI, we're still scrambling to get standards that we can all adopt. So whilst the understanding of ethical principles has evolved immensely in the last 5 years, and that's really positive, I'm not seeing enough action. Every company has a code of ethics on their website, pretty much, right?
I think you needed the public awareness, the public outcry. What we have seen, or what we are seeing with, ChatGPT, etc., since last autumn, where everyone's just talking about it. It needed this become tangible, like what AI is. Up until, a year ago, really, AI was something that was reserved to researchers and engineers, and those that build it understand it and see the risk. But for the public, it was this, the sci-fi thing. Now it's very real. It's an app. You type things and you see it. You do midjourney, all of those things. And from there, I do hope, or I'm hopeful that, we will have a more critical and faster pace of regulation, of public discourse, because it requires this agreement. It requires, as a society, to also take a stance about what we want AI to be, what we want not to be, where it should be applied, where it should not be applied. What you don't do is equally important as what you do. So yeah, I'm hopeful actually that this has actually moved, the whole discourse and then leap.
That's quite a nuanced discussion that has to happen, though. And I mean, there was some incredible statistics coming out of the US a couple of weeks ago. Pew Research did a study, and they found that 63% of American adults thought that there was a strong risk that AI was going to kill us all, that it was a civilizational, existential threat. We just hear doom, 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 doom every time you open up the front page, turn on the evening news, whatever at the moment. There are people warning that, often people who are actually building the stuff, that it could kill us all. Is that vaguely realistic, and is it a hindrance or a help?
It's both, I think. To be honest, yes, of course, there can be very negative consequences. I think that's absolutely true. Think of AI in safety-critical systems, right? Automotive, aviation, etc. It's being applied today, and yeah, I think this is where regulations on applications of quality standards are incredibly critical. Think also of manipulation and everything that can happen. So I think it is helpful. It elevates the discourse to everyone wanting to participate. But then, of course, now something needs to happen there. We need to be able to, I believe, develop freely and create, Europe as a hub for development of AI. But then be very clear which applications carry which risk, and be quite thorough there.
Right. I mean, isn't that the problem if you have this huge doom discourse where everybody is quite convinced that this is an existential threat? I mean, you're not going to get good regulation out of that, are you? Or what do you think?
So there's just the data point you shared. It's quite, it's a good example of the polarization or the kind of narrative that is being over-indexed and overhyped in the conversations. It's just on this panel, right? There are people who are working on, or in the audience as well, who are using AI to solve challenges around or help solve needs of health systems, who are solving needs for justice systems. If we go down that path of doom and gloom and just mass public fear of AI and decide to not use it or ban it, what answer am I going to give to the woman who's trying to get a ditched virtual hearing for her court case when she can't afford to find childcare for her kids and would rather use AI to do it virtually? Or a person who's facing violence and cannot afford a lawyer and is looking for advice to reduce the bill that they need. It's, so when I hear these terms like we should slow down AI or ban or just stop until we find the answers to regulation, it really worries me that we're going to stop all the good work that also needs to happen in communities where people don't have abundance of services. So my call would be, instead of slowing down development, speed up regulation.
Okay. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at what we've been trying to do, just in the past month, we've surveyed over 200 Brusselsers about AI, their opinions, fears, hopes, and it was a very interesting mixed bag, I would say. But one of the key points is we asked them, would you be interested in participating to panels on projects that could have a local impact, either from public sector, from academia? They said overwhelmingly yes, they want to participate. And we then asked the motivation, why would you do it? Not that we would doubt them, but they said because they want to be educated. And the first feedback we got, we want to know more. So for them, and I think this makes me a bit hopeful, because I do tend to concur that regulation is not fast enough, unfortunately, and so this makes me worried at times. But on the other side, I see that there is now an appetite in the population to also provide more feedback. Then the whole challenge that we all know of is not to tokenize it and just use it as one information that we will not include in a regulation. So I think it's one of the biggest challenges in terms of AI. I think it's impacting us all. But how do we make sense of this voice, integrate it in local regulation? And we know that now cities tend to have their own strategies for their own cities or regions. So this is one of the vehicles where I think it could be a bit formalized and more concrete than just nice words.
Mm-hmm. Meyer, do you agree that regulation's moving too slowly?
I think, yeah, regulation always moves too slowly. That's the challenge with the technology, and technological advancement will always be quicker, right? And there's always funding available. There's always private funding, right? That promotes that. There's a commercial imperative, and so on. But I do think, I mean, there's certain things where industry is coming together, actually. I mean, not necessarily the doom and gloom things that we've been discussing, but say, okay, what are the ways to make data really transparent, or is there ways to share data, to be really, really open about how systems are built, not to prioritize everything and say, like, this is our proprietary IP, but actually share amongst communities. So I think there's things happening in the industry, starting to happen, which can compensate some of the slowness.
What should regulators do at this point? Because they're being yelled at from all sides, right? I mean, if you've got 63% of the American adult population thinking it's an existential threat. I mean, that's into moral panic territory. That's into, well, historically, moral panics tend to result in bad regulation. Do you think that there's a threat of that now, of regulation stifling the good stuff?
No, I don't think so, actually. I think, okay, first of all, other than regulation, education needs to happen. Because the reason why there's all the surveys around doom and gloom and everyone's fearing AI is also because the education never happened about what the opportunities are, where essentially people are seeing the headlines. And that's it, right? So education is incredibly important. I do think that there needs to be a space for development, to actually promote AI research, promote AI development. Funding, such as it happens in Europe and the US, private funding is incredibly important, but I also think public funding. I think academia needs to really be supported across Europe to make sure that AI is developed not just by private entities, but also public and academic entities. I think there needs to save space for development. And then I do firmly believe in those risk levels and the different applications. Regulation, safety standards. There are so many industries that have rigid safety standards, and they're fine. So AI will be okay too, I believe.
Thoughts on the speed of regulation and what should happen?
I would just add that bringing in regulation at this point on some of the fundamental principles of how AI interacts with humans, for example, is actually going to drive more innovation and adoption. So, for example, the trust issue, parking doom and gloom for a moment, but humans trusting AI is going to come from, first of all, do we know we are talking to an AI? Do we have the right to know that we are talking to an AI? The transparency there. Where is it learning that information from? Can it show its sources? And can as a human I go and verify the recommendation that was made? Or the publisher or creator of the AI explaining how and when to use it and when not to use it and how to trust the information. If there's clarity around that, it's going to make it easier for people to embrace the good that comes with it. Whereas if it is unclear whether you're using a machine, it's unclear whether the machine knows how to do the job it's pretending or trying to do, it's going to hinder innovation.
I think, additionally, I think there is on one side the regulation that we need to also have a clear rules of the game. What is, I think, lagging is maybe harmonized rules across the world. When I hear for that BARD or ChatGPT might not happen in Europe or not anymore because it's too complicated, you see that the rules are not harmonized. And so this is definitely a worry because it means that it's quite imbalanced and it's such a, yeah, it's a pain in many ways. On the other side, there's another type of regulation that I think should maybe happen, is allowing even the public sector to experiment more with the technologies. And what we see is that the rise of low regulation zone or experimentation zones where local deciders and local actors can try and experiment with technologies, and then you're playing a bit less catch up with the technologies when they disrupt, like with Uber or with the other type of companies that change the game because they come with the technologies and people are not prepared or local governments are not prepared. And I think this new type of regulation that could allow researchers to work with public authorities, citizens to maybe experiment, could maybe prepare us all as a bit better to the rise of new technologies, just because we get a bit more acquainted, a bit more educated, and we at least are able to say we want that or we don't want that. It goes from recognition, facial recognition, etc. You can set limits.
Cool. Well, this is a debate that's going to be going on for months and years and decades, but right now we have 10 seconds left, so that's just enough time to say thanks very much to our panelists.
Thank you.